Shalom, shalom. Once again, it's your brother Azayahu, aka Ezra ben Khazar the Hebrew, here with another video. And today, as some exciting news, my big Y has finally came in, and this is the reveal video. So before, I've already announced to you guys that my haplogroup, the paternal line, which is your father's 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 line, goes back to R1A Z280, and that we found out later on that it was part of a somewhat rare branch, RS24902. Well, now I have my big Y. And today we will be breaking down what I believe is the history of this haplogroup and possibly the story of my paternal ancestors. Now, my haplogroup is a branch of R-YP561. Now, the interesting thing about R-24902 is that the branches really lead into R-YP561. There's really no way around it. It seems like that's the main branch. And then that haplogroup in turn splits into two branches. So we're going to be looking at the history of YP561, and then I will reveal my big Y, and we'll go into a little bit of that. I'll start this off by mentioning that R-YP561 is indeed found in the ancient Avars, who are related to the Khazars. So we already see from the jump that this haplogroup has a connection to this group of people. But we're going to start way back at the beginning to see how this happens. We know that the Pannonian Avars form in Central Asia from various groups, including Iranian peoples, Ugarians peoples, Oghur Turks, and the Roran tribes from the Roran Khaganate. This has been supported as well by DNA. Some Avar remains have a great amount of Northeast Asian DNA. So when we look at the Roran Khaganate, we know that it grew from the roots of the Xiongnu. These people are known in the West as the Huns, as they moved into Europe with Attila. The Roran also grow from the roots of the Xianbei. We also know that Scythian associated ancestry is in the Avar groups. So if the Avars spring from the same groups as the Roran and the Xiongnu, this gives more clue of how my haplogroup could have been found among the Avars. Because we know that the Xiongnu have an influx of steppe DNA from Western steppe herders. Some of these people include people such as the Sintaja culture, the Shrubnea culture, and the Sarmatians. But before we even get to these cultures, we should know that these cultures were created by an influx of migrants who came from East and Central Europe, from the corded ware culture, which is where my haplogroup basically derives. If you look at these pictures here, you'll see earlier on, Yanea moved into corded ware, and these people are basically the people who carried and brought forth the expansion of the R1A haplogroup. Later on, these people would move out of East and Central Europe into the Sintaja culture, the Androvenal culture, and the Carousel culture, making the Scythians and the Proto-Turks. So let's start from the top. The earliest R-S24902 is found in a sample called PLN 17. He is an early Bronze Age man from, excuse me if I say this wrong, Khazarian, northern Poland. Now, the site is classified as a part of the Strinzizo culture. I probably said that wrong too. But they say that this culture is the result of contacts between the local communities of southeastern Poland and the Kurgan culture, who are people from the steppe, the horse riders. This sample even had a lot of steppe ancestry. So we see that this culture was a subgroup of the corded ware culture, and it also has relations to other cultures, the Khmer culture and the Trinzic culture. The Khmer culture plays a hand in the Thracians, who have a whole area. These peoples are starting to develop in the Balkan area as well. So we have a Scythian, Thracian, Cimmerian relationship in the ancient Balkans. So this could signify that branches or parts or certain people carrying R-S24902 could have always been in the Carpathian area or in the area of the Pannonia. There's also reports of it being in a potential Untite sample. So we have this whole area being covered with this haplogroup. But it's also a potential sample of it in the Shrubnea culture. So what does this signify? This signifies that there was indeed a Central East European migration back into the steppes. We read here, the Syntasia, a Western forest steppe culture with genetic links to the European corded ware cultures, were masters of bronze, metallurgy, and chariotry. And the appearance of this ancestry on the eastern steppe may be linked to the introduction of new, especially horse-related, technologies. DSKC sites in particular show widespread evidence for horse use in transport and perhaps even riding. The strong east-west genetic division among Bronze Age Eastern steppe populations at this time was maintained for more than a millennium and through the end of the early Iron Age, when the first clear evidence for widespread horseback riding appears, and the heightened mobility of some groups, notably the Eastern slab grave culture, began to disrupt this structure. Eventually, the three major ancestries met and mixed, and this was contemporaneous with the emergence of the Xiongnu Empire. So this is how the Xiongnu were created. This steppe influx from the Syntasia cultures, Shrubnea cultures, and Drovino cultures that all come from the corded ware. And then you have the slab grave and the Kovsko as well. All these people mix, but the steppe influx ends up making something called the Altai, Middle Late Bronze Age. We read here, the populations making up the heterogeneous Altai Middle Late Bronze Age clan left descendants in the Altai Sand region, who were later identified as the Sagli Yukik site of Chataman Mountain. We read down here, during the early Iron Age, the Sagli Uyuk were pastoralists and millet agro-pastoralists, largely centered in the upper Yenisei region of present-day Tuva. Together with the Pazyryk of the Altai and the Saka of eastern Kazakhstan, they form part of a broader Scythian cultural phenomenon that stretched across the western steppe, Tarim Basin, and upper Yenisei. And this is pretty much confirmed because we know that a Western Scythian has one of the clades in YP561. As I said, there's only two clades, it has the my brother clade. And he is also related maternally to the Scythians in the east via the Adibel culture. As we see here, they both share the mtDNA U5. This is Scythian 193. And there's some interesting things about this sample that we will get into later. Another signifier of this haplogroup's migration to the east is that the basal branches are now found in the Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, or the area of the Fatyanovo culture, the culture that would go into the said Sintaja culture. From this point, it's safe to say that we know that R-YP561 could have been part of the back to west migration, starting with the Scythian Sakas, as well as the Huns from the Xiongnu to the Avars. As we've seen the haplogroup in the Avars, and we know that the Saka cultures are also a part of the ethnogenesis of the Khazars. As we've seen, the Khazaric culture is one of the main cultures that make the Khazar peoples. Most Khazar samples consistently appear as admixed matches for Khazaric Iron Age. Something to note is there's a difference between the early Iron Age and the later Iron Age. One is more steppe and one is more Baikal. But the early Iron Age that's more steppe, like Sintasha, are close to Bashkir people, Udmurt, and etc., as you see here. And as we take a look at some of these admixture results, we see here Tuva, Iron Age, Adibel culture, and we also see Israel, Western Scythian, and Avar, the cultures that we've been talking about. But this, the Israel genome is signifying that the Israelites did start to mix with the Khazars, and this was early on. I also want you to look at this Khazar DNA sample to show you that early Avar is genetically similar to the Khazar samples that we have. Now, according to the Schechner letter, some Khazars were already admixed with Israelites from way early on. Now, this is interesting to note because the Scythian that we talked about, Scythian 193, that has our haplogroup, it has substantial Levantine ancestry and no Anatolian ancestry. So this is very interesting. So he had Southern Near Eastern ancestry in addition to his steppe ancestry. So with all this, we see in my genome and in the genome of this haplogroup, a corded where to the east as Western steppe herders becoming Scythians and Xiongnu, back to the west, bringing the haplogroup with a Scythian Avar connection with an autosomal link to the Near East. And if we add this to the Saltovo-Mayaki DNA that shows up very high in my DNA, as we see here, I think this pretty much gives all the evidence that we need and gives evidence to all that we read about the Khazars and what I know about my family line, which I'll be sharing in the upcoming videos now that we're kind of wrapping up the DNA things. So here is the distribution of YP561 today. And could there possibly be a Sephardic Khazar link with the city of Segovia? As we know, there was Khazar students who became Sephardim. So the sub-branch of this RYP561 that we've been studying, found in the Scythians, found in the Avars, the branch that I come from is R-BY176489. Now that is my big Y result. And now what I find interesting is that the other person with this result is located in Mexico. And since we just talked about Sephardim, an interesting thing to note is that a lot of Sephardim who were expelled from Spain ended up in Mexico. So right here, following this graph here, we see that the branch of my Mexican cousin was established in 500 CE, roughly around the time where we would have the Huns and the Khazars being established. So it's possible that he could have become one of the Sephardim Khazars. And then from 1200 CE, it's in Norway. And we know this is after the Vikings establishment, who ended up destroying the Khazars. But it's interesting that the Khazar coin that said Moses is the messenger of God was found in a Viking hoard. So maybe there's some things to note. This also matches some information that we have about the Hungarian conquerors. The high proportions of shared lineages with the conquerors were detected in the Vikings from Norway. So that's interesting to note. Now, when we look up more about the Mexican who has the same haplogroup as me, I seen that his family can be found in the J Levites group, which I found in a family tree database connected to my haplogroup. So there's Levites that have, there's people with tradition of being a Levite with this haplogroup, but it seems that he is one of the Anosim possibly, or a crypto Jew who was born in Mexico. He was born in the city of Michoacan. And as we read here in Culano, the Jews tried to evade the Inquisition by moving away from Mexico City. For example, to land that now is in the state of Michoacan. They started agricultural enterprises there, producing the famous Todah cheese. But even to this distant place, the Inquisition extended itself, and its actions against Jews there are very well documented. Nonetheless, more and more Jews who had been hiding in Spain came to Mexico, thinking it might be safer for them there. And when you look at DNA from this region, there are Jewish markers found. Adding this information with the information that I know about my family line and my autosomal results, I think as of now we could say that I have a Khazar Israelite lineage. So this is all very interesting. Now, I tried to go on, what's it called? I think it's called JewishDNA.net to see if this lineage could be found there. And there was one that I figured could be it. It was AB468. Now, I put the numbers into NevGen, and at one point it said that it could be S24902, which is my branch. It's a Mizrahi branch. But it was a very low chance. It really is an unsupported clade. They really don't know what it is. So it could still be my clade, but we really don't know for sure. But this branch has a common link with a Sephardic branch called AB644. Now, when I put this branch into NevGen, it came out as a Z280 branch, YP270. Now, if you remember from videos back, this is actually the Algerian Jew that had R1AZ280. Who said he had a line of rabbis, and his family was from Algeria. So this is very fascinating, and we have a possible link of his family and my family. So this is very fascinating, and we'll continue to dig into all of this stuff. Now, if we look into my autosomal results, we see fascinating links with the Mountain Jews in Dagestan and Hungary. And I want to say now that after October 7th, it's been very interesting what I've seen happening in Dagestan, and I pray for things to get better. It should not be like this. As one Mountain Jew said, I can't describe how shocking it is to see neighbors who we played with as children and whom we visited when we went back turn on our community so violently and so suddenly. And then actually just earlier this month, actually even weeks ago, this week, the Derbent synagogue was burnt down and destroyed. An attack in Dagestan on religious people, Christians and Jews. So keep them in your prayers. My name is Ezra ben Khazar. I hope you enjoyed my big Y reveal. Next, we will go into the history of my family and continue to examine the Khazarian Jewish story. Shalom, grace and peace. In the name of the Messiah, Yeshua.